This is War Map. What's going on in Kupyansk? The situation on the Kupyansk front remains extremely tense. In Kupyansk, heavy battles continue. Ukrainian formations, taking advantage of their numerical superiority, are deploying assault groups. Often, these groups are quite large by current standards, judging by the footage of the Archangel of Special Forces. The AFU is operating practically throughout the city, and Russian troops are holding a focal defense, with the zones of conditional control remaining the same. Moreover, small groups of Ukrainian formations are already moving towards Golubovka, and some of them are being destroyed right on its outskirts. It should be noted that this breakthrough by Ukrainian formations did not happen in one day. The first alarming signals appeared as early as the beginning of December. Therefore, it is premature to talk about the outcome of the battles on this section. Although the situation remains close to critical, it can still be rectified. What are the problems? A significant part of the bridgehead on the western bank of the Oskol River has been lost. Ukrainian formations have wedged themselves between Zapadnoye and Kalinovo. The loss of unstable control by the Russian armed forces over Kondrashovka, Radkovka, and the surrounding area of Moskovka is confirmed. In attempts to act on false reports, one of the Russian units operating there lost almost 150 soldiers in December on the approaches to one of the settlements liberated in November. The territorial losses themselves are not large. Of the 11 liberated villages, the Russian armed forces actually controlled only 3. In Dorogovka and Dolzhenka, apparently, sabotage and reconnaissance groups briefly entered in June and August. Similar events occurred in October in Pesky. Statements that Kupyansk and the surrounding area were completely under control were first made at a time when there was not only no consolidation of forces, but only extremely small groups were operating there. However, there was no proper consolidation in the city either before or after the statement about its liberation. The systematic exaggeration of successes and the transmission of incorrect information upwards have already led to the dissemination of false information at the highest level. Due to incorrect reports on the situation, reserves that were not needed for the capture and clearing of Kupyansk were transferred to other sectors. The Special Forces units of the Ukrainian armed forces, thrown into a desperate attack, struck essentially into empty space. The Russian infiltration groups, for obvious reasons, could not contain the advance of superior forces. There were no huge losses in Kupyansk, since there was practically no one to lose there. The main question is, who is lying in favor of the Ukrainian armed forces in the Kupyansk direction, and for what purpose? This Russian soldier near the front line explained the situation in the best way.
Друзья, всем привет! И ситуация в Купянске. Соответственно, вчера блогеры различные, живущие за границей, город сдали. Но они всегда бегут впереди паровоза, гонятся за сенсациями, за инсайдами. А город не сдан. Ситуация тяжелая. Западная часть города фактически за врагом. Наши подразделения на правом берегу Оскола очень сильно осложнена логистика за счет того, что враг выбил нас из ряда опорных пунктов. И, соответственно, чтобы вы понимали, Купянск разделяет довольно полноводная река Оскол. И это, естественно, затрудняет логистику. Часть подразделений наших отсечено. И снабжается с дронов, больше вариантов никаких нет. Враг наступает с севера, занял ряд точек в восточной части города. То есть большая часть города либо в серой зоне, либо за врагом. Но при этом город до сих пор не оставлен, как говорят там многие и все такое прочее. Удержим ли мы город? Не факт. Не факт, и, возможно, Купянск придется брать 3-й раз. Соответственно, почему это произошло? Ну, имели место, естественно, шапкозакидательские настроения, как вы все это все прекрасно знаете, да, доклады и все такое прочее. Часть резервов, которые должны были защищать город, они отошли, потому что город забрали. И, соответственно, враг сейчас испытывает, у врага численный перевес, есть определенная нехватка личного состава, при этом работает наша авиация, артиллерия, дроны. Ну, личный состав там бьется отчаянно. Вопрос в том, что бьется в меньшинстве. Поэтому была проделана реально большая работа по охвату города. Но в целом по флангам эти позиции у нас сохраняются. Повторюсь, удерживали мы город, не факт. Но ситуация сложная и противоречивая. Как говорится, все покрыто туманом войны. Но на данном этапе Купянск, несмотря на то, что большая часть в серой зоне и за врагом, не сдан. Вот так.
Meanwhile, Pokrovsk counterattacks. On the Pokrovsk-Mirnograd direction, after repelling the attacks of Ukrainian formations on Pokrovsk, Fierce clashes continue in several sectors, where the battles are raging. To the west of Pokrovsk, Ukrainian formations attacked with the forces of the 225th Motor Rifle Regiment, and it was there that the infamous Australian Abrams was burned. In the area of Grishino, heavy battles continue. Earlier, Russian units were able to hold on to the settlement, and the situation remains difficult. To the northeast, counterattacks are taking place in the forest strips, where the road of life of Ukrainian formations to Mirnograd once passed. In it, cleanup operations continue, and there are fewer and fewer Ukrainian formations in the city. Russian units continue to occupy Rudansko. On the internet, frames of multiple strikes on the western outskirts have appeared. A large group of the AFU was hit on the outskirts during an attempt to enter the city, and shortly after, evidence of the cleanup of the same area by soldiers of the 9th Motor Rifle Brigade was published. The city repeatedly passed from hand to hand, and it is likely that the Russian armed forces will soon liberate it again. The AFU does not give up attempts to counterattack on the entire direction, trying to gain time for the organization of defense in Dobropili. That location, apparently, is considered by the Ukrainian command as the next target for the offensive of the group of troops in center. Russian successes near Siversk. From the former Siversk direction, which a year ago was a source of not very good news, new reports are coming in about the advances of Russian units. The Russian Ministry of Defense officially announced the liberation of the settlement of Sviato-Pokrovskoye. Based on the published videos, almost the entire village is already under the control of the Russian armed forces. Taking the settlement became possible after Ukrainian formations were driven out of the ridge of hills to the north, almost a kilometer from the settlement. The AFU had a developed network of fortifications there. However, with the loss of Siversk, the Ukrainian formations were unable to hold them further. And now, in fact, the route further west through Reznikovka is open for Russian units. The terrain is similar to Sviato-Pokrovskoye. To the north of the settlement, there are heights with Ukrainian armed forces strongholds, and to the south, there is a fairly sparse development of private houses. Further north, pockets are being cleared, where Ukrainian formations were practically blocked as a result of the offensive of Russian troops in both this and the neighboring Lyman direction. On the southern flank, in the fields near Pazeno, Petrovskoye, according to some reports, there are also significant successes. However, there are no objective control images from there yet, and the information is extremely contradictory. Extremely positive reports are coming from the entire Siversk direction related to the advance of Russian troops. In fact, at the moment, it is already possible to talk about the final loss by the AFU of the ability to counterattack towards Siversk. This is precisely why the Ukrainian General Staff's relatively sudden admission of the loss of control over the city, which actually happened several weeks ago, is connected. However, it should be noted that the successes here were the result not only of painstaking combat work, but also of the advances of neighboring units from the West Group near Lyman, as well as the AFU's redeployment of forces to other directions, and of course, working on correcting past mistakes. Until next update.
Бежать нет!